You know, you think you've been on a spree. You have never been on a spree like this one. Welcome to the Film Threat Podcast. I am Chris Gore. I am here, and my job is to tell you about independent films that you really need to discover. And this one's Spree. It's not like anything that you've ever seen. Let's talk to the director of Spree, Eugene Kotlyarenko. Hopefully, I got that right. Kotlyarenko.
Yeah, good.
I love it. I love it. I'm gonna assume Russian. It's Russian, right?
It's actually Ukrainian. I was born in Odessa, Ukraine. Whenever you see the Anko, that's Ukrainian usually.
Ah, got it. Great. Now, Spree is really what's so weird is I got the screener for Spree. I didn't watch a trailer, which I try to always avoid trailers. And when I started watching it, I thought, what is this documentary? Now it's not a documentary, but it definitely has a documentary found footage feel. I wouldn't necessarily lump it into the found footage film category, but it is a genre bending film that is part thriller, social media horror. It's ripped from our headlines and our time, focusing on social media and the lengths people will go to get social media currency. Where did Spree come from? Where did this inspiration to put this story on the screen?
Just came from looking in the mirror, thinking about all of us. We live in a world where everyone can kind of feel the desperation of, the attention economy, right? That we're all in, right? We sort of mediate our lives through our social media profiles and personas and stuff. And, we get that dopamine rush when we post something, and a lot of people like it. And we feel sort of rejected and small when we don't get the sort of views or reposts or whatever we might desire desperately. So it sort of originates in that, and just understanding that, as the years go by, more and more of our self-worth and our general culture sort of migrates into this virtual space. And so Kurt Kunkel, who is the main character, I don't want to say protagonist because he's quite villainous, but the main character in the film is almost like what he does, right? This is a rampage, is an extrapolation, right? The logical, horrific conclusion of the feeling that we all feel when we are thirsty for the likes,
Your protagonist, I'm glad you put it that way. I wouldn't describe him as the hero. He's definitely, yeah.
He's just he's the surrogate. He's also it's right. It's very, so the movie is like you're saying a documentary. It's presented as a live stream, right? Something that's familiar to people who use Instagram Live or Facebook Live or Twitch or something, right? He is presenting this live stream tutorial about how to go viral, right? So he's at once the host in a way and also a surrogate for the audience. So there's this, anytime we watch something live streamed or, you're peeking over someone's shoulder at their phone, there's an inherent sense of voyeurism, right? So you're along for the ride very explicitly, right? Because he's also a rideshare driver. So you're literally stuck in the car with him, and he's a streamer. So you're, stuck in the stream with him. And so he's a surrogate, and he's also, the object of your gaze at the same time.
Well, your lead actor is very likable.
Joe Keery. I mean, he is a brilliant actor. He's mostly known from Stranger Things, right? He plays Steve Harrington. And he was able to really find the pathos in the cringe, right? So Kurt Kunkel is such a cringe character, almost like a walking embodiment of this sort of like obliviousness to how pathetic they're being transparently. And, it's something that most of us are kind of able to avoid, although there are a sea of people out there on social media who don't understand that they're a desperate attempt at trying to latch onto a trend or be the center of attention is just so, explicitly pathetic. But Joe was able to find the sort of sadness and pathos of this character that, I sort of wrote to make fun of. Like, the film is, while it does horror and thriller elements, and I love those parts of it, to me, it's like a satire, it's we need to make fun of people who engage in violence for attention. That's kind of my approach to the movie, beyond just like sort of like, hey, let's reflect on how addicted we are to social media and attention. Let's also reflect on people in our society who use violence for attention. Not just reflect, let's actually make fun of them. Let's knock them down a bunch of pegs, because like when we had our previous president, who was like responsible in trying to grapple with mass violence in America, not do that through very like impassioned and logical pleas against violence. And a newspaper or magazine cannot do that, cannot make fun of these people. They have to psychoanalyze them. They have to look for the socioeconomic origins of it or something. But myself as a filmmaker, I can make fun of these people, and I do think audiences would like to see that. Let's make fun of Joker. Let's not make Joker seem like appealing and cool for killing a bunch of people. Let's actually find that person who's using violence for attention and make fun of him.
Well, this movie could not be more timely with everything that's happening in the world. And I feel like we're not quite there. Social media has not been in, use by, I think more people use social media than vote in elections.
Oh, for sure.
But I think that
people use TikTok in America than vote.
Yeah, that's true. But I think that we don't even know of what the long-term effects of, use of social media are. We don't. I mean, we know effects scientifically of what happens to you when you smoke, right?
Yeah.
When you smoke cigarettes, we know certain, what certain things. What certain things will do to us. We don't know really what social media will do. And I think that your film is sort of a glimpse of this is a very extreme case. Yeah. But I think that it's in some ways, you mentioned cringe, but it's also kind of a warning in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the movie is speculative fiction. I mean, I hope something like this will never happen, although during the shoot, there was the Christchurch. During the film shoot, there was the Christchurch shootings, and stuff like this pops up. So, like you said, in some ways it's reflective of the headlines, even though it's not ripped from the headlines. Mm-hmm. But it's not speculative fiction. I guess it's not sci-fi. We all do have this addiction problem. Like, this is actually a neurological problem that we now all have, which is the dopamine rush from the gamified social media, right? Like the apps and shit are built this way to make you feel the rush of the attention. Like, what it's like when you like a comment, when you like a post, it's a heart on Instagram, it's a heart on Twitter. Heart is the international symbol for love, right? So like, we are filtering all of our most primal emotions through attention on social media, so like, this is not some future feeling. This is something that I think anyone who's young, especially who was born into social media, right, like Zoomers and stuff, they are living this. They're grappling with the horrors of defining themselves entirely through their mediated personas on social media, and many are choosing to opt out, which I think makes total sense. And then all of the sort of millennials and like Gen X and boomers are kind of like weirdly stuck in this morass where they still define themselves like these kind of dying platforms like Facebook or so it's interesting. The one the movie couldn't predict though is COVID. We blew it. Right. We blew it on that one. So
well, it's interesting because I have found that I just use social media less. A couple years ago, I just sort of threw it away, and honestly, I mean, I was like, I would post 4 or 5, 10 times a day if I was doing something that was interesting at a film festival or doing. Now I can't stop using social media because I use it to promote things that I do, but I've dramatically reduced. I don't post every day. That's one thing. I just don't post every day. I will say I actually feel a lot happier. How can you tell me about your own personal use of social media and how that impacted the film? And did you use social media while you were making the movie? I'm just curious.
While I was making it, no, because I'm like working 21 to 2 hours a day when I'm making the film, especially during the shoot, but then the long post-production process as well. Like I was, writing all of those comments that are in the film. There's over, like 7,500 comments that are on screen in the film. And so I was coming up with all of the names, usernames and comments, and then working with some talented artists to animate that. So I wasn't like on social media all the time during the film. Look, we all have different relationships to it, right? Like I do think in general, society, we're at this moment where people do feel exhausted by it, but we're also at this moment where, like it's being catalyzed for purposes of justice lately, right? And that is, offers a new light to it. I mean, if you look back to something like 10 years ago, like the Arab Spring, it was completely mobilized for, societal revolution. And, now in the US and also across the world, it's being used for social justice in ways that are, extremely effective. In general, I do think like in the film, right, it shows what Kurt is engaging in is the lowest common denominator behavior, right? We know that violence and conflict and, gonzo horror yields views, right? Leads to eyeballs and stuff, as long as it's done under the guise of some sort of commodifiable, as long as you're able to convert it into like a presentable thing, you can, get attention. So I do think in general, regardless of the sort of intentions behind, posting, attention always leads to sort of lowest common denominator mentality, and that ultimately is bad for the human soul. So I do think that social media in this way is like bad, right? Like for instance, let me just say like as we all were kind of onboarded onto social media, if you can recall back, 10, 15, where you were 15 years ago, the beginning of Facebook, the beginning of Twitter, it was predicated on this idea that sharing, right, sharing your experience was inherently good, was a moral good to share your personal experience and put that out into the world. And what it did was it democratized voices, which inherently is good. But if you take that logic and say, no matter what you post, sharing is inherently good, you arrive at Kurt Kunkel, right? Someone who sees no moral, makes no moral judgment on what's being shared and just says, hey, I'm sharing this tutorial. That is inherently good. Now watch me kill a bunch of people to show you how to go viral. You know what I mean? So that's actually the logic that we're all sort of operating on when we, sign the agreement to start posting shit, whether we want to admit it or not.
To divert to a second to maybe something more lighthearted.
Yeah.
Look, I think about this stuff all the time. But I think the thing that saved me was just posting less. And I read a book about how to quit your social media accounts. I could not fully quit, but I just reduced. I'm sort of like, I'm like the friend of mine who quit smoking, who when we go out for drinks says, I'm just going to have one cigarette. I'm just going to bum one cigarette. That's how I feel every time I post on social media. It's I'm the smoker that just needs one. I just need a puff. I just want to taste.
But you kind of can't really go off of it, Chris, right? Because you have a brand.
True.
You have a company. True. You have something that is very intimately linked to your, financial and commercial and personal identity, right? And so if you were to get off of it, you would lose many, many sources of income, attention. Right? It's an attention economy, right? So now your entire personhood is bound up in how you relate to everyone who follows you. And it's a tricky trap, and we all are complicit in it because we all want to exist. So if you post less, like maybe that's better for your sanity, but it's like, how can you share the latest, live cast about Spree if you don't post?
Yeah. Well, I will be posting about Spree.
Okay, good. Okay, good. You must.
Tell me what it was like, just out of curiosity, because I'm a fan, David Arquette. How much fun was it to work with him? I think picks really interesting indie films to be involved in. I've seen him in a couple of really interesting ones lately, and yours included.
David is a lovely person and such a creative performer. He's great at improv. Actually, I gotta say, everyone in the film was so great at improv, from Joe to Sashir to Frankie Grande, Lola Kent, Kyle Mooney. They're people who are excellent improvers, and David definitely ranks up there with them. And it's just super fun. He's super high energy, and he loves to riff. And the scenes that we did with him, like at the strip club or in the car, going when Kurt, I don't want to ruin things, when Kurt was done, whatever. Those were done, fast, real fast. Like that ride with Kurt, that was 3 takes up Mulholland, and down Mulholland. And no, actually, sorry, Laurel Canyon Boulevard, whatever. So no, I love the guy. And the first time we met to talk about the role, I told him about how Joe and I were watching a lot of cringe compilations, and he said, "What's that?" And I explained to him, these people who like don't get they're embarrassing themselves. And he's like, "Oh my God, I think I just realized a few days ago that maybe my entire life is a cringe compilation." And I was like, "Okay, David, maybe so. I cannot judge that. But when you jump into the role of this washed up DJ daddy, you're going to go back to before you realized your life was the cringe compilation and just channel that, my friend." And he was game. He's just a great guy. And right now we're doing actually like a in character meta campaign for the film. Like Kurt's World 96 is our kind of promotion Instagram. It's weirdly very popular. We have a lot of followers, and David and I are constantly like making videos and stuff. I'm pulling back the curtain a little bit. I don't want to do that, but David's providing a lot of amazing material in character for that.
Well, that's cool. He's I've heard him on Howard Stern. He's very brutally honest on there. I think he might be talking about that when he talks about cringe moments. Spree is also getting a unique release. It's coming to drive-ins and video on demand, which I think that like there's so many independent films now and so many choices for indies to see, which I think is awesome. And what I love about this, some of the good things that have come from this global health crisis has been putting Hollywood movies on pause and putting a little bit more of attention on the independent films that we champion at Film Threat, and yours being among them. So tell us about the release. I know it's coming to drive-ins, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's being same day on drive-ins across the US and maybe even Canada, and also VOD, so iTunes, Amazon, and stuff. I mean, like this film, right, is a film where as a viewer you are stuck in the car with Kurt, right? So I can't imagine, honestly, a better viewing environment besides maybe like a 70 millimeter IMAX or something of watching this film. It's so appropriate, right? You're looking through your windshield onto a film that's trapped inside of a moving vehicle. In general, I would say, like there's a ton of Hollywood movies that are pretty boring, and like people drink the Kool-Aid and and generally pay $14 and maybe are disappointed by them. And I would say, it's pretty similar in the independent landscape. Like, as filmmakers, it's our responsibility to not just draw people in through like a sick trailer or something, but to make a film that rewards their risk. And obviously when you're watching independent film, it's more of a quote unquote risk because, it's not from a major studio or whatever, but it's our job to make sure that people feel like got their money's worth from film, right? And whether you're the biggest tentpole studio film or the smallest independent, the responsibility is the same, right? Like we as filmmakers, like there's a lot of other things vying for people's attention, and it is our duty to make sure when they watch a film, they love watching that film, and that inspires them to watch more films, whether they be independent or from, an established, whatever, Hollywood or South Korea or whatever, or the UK, So I'm an independent filmmaker. I've made all films independently, but I don't necessarily think that inherently those types of films are better. I just think that I respect any filmmaker who wants an audience to feel something new, to experience something that feels unique, and also it's just a lot of fun to watch,
Well, fun and unique definitely describes Spree. And you're right. Actually, I hadn't thought about that. Seeing it at the drive-in, you're actually seeing it in the circumstances.
Yeah.
Much of the film takes place in a car. You'll be, if you're in a car watching it, it's even better. That's like a sort of, that's like a next level 4D.
It's pretty meta.
Experience.
Yeah. It's pretty cool.
Awesome.
August 14th. I don't know if we said that. It's August 14th.
No. August 14th, or whenever you see this podcast, it'll be out on VOD, iTunes. You can check it. Eugene, thank you for being on the Film Threat podcast. I also want to thank our sponsor, Storyblocks. Go to storyblocks.com/film threat. It's tools for filmmakers. I've had a lot of filmmakers on the show that actually use Storyblocks, oddly enough. Music that's free to use. You're looking for a drone shot over LA, they have it. It's yours to use if you're subscribers. So support Film Threat and go to storyblocks.com/film threat. Eugene, thanks for being on the show, man. It's awesome to see you. This is I mean, last time, maybe to put, if you're a subscriber to the Film Threat podcast, Eugene was on another episode from South by Southwest like a couple years ago. What was the film that
Wobble Palace.
What was it?
It was called Wobble Palace.
That's right, Wobble Palace. That is, I really love that film. It's
it's different, but you can see the through. If you watch Spree and you like that, you should watch Wobble Palace, because you'll see.
Well, you'll see. I mean, Wobble Palace deals with some aspects of social media, but a lot of like online dating, and it's all. What I really like about your films is the passion, heart, but also the fact that they're done in a way that like you're dealing with stuff that's now, you know. And I kind of feel like Hollywood, they take a while to catch up, and I feel like you're ahead of the trends. So thanks again.
Thanks very much for
telling us. All right, check out Spree, everybody. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris.